My parents told me, we used 87% of your college funds to buy your sister's new apartment. My sister sneered, you're totally broke now. But I burst out laughing, because they had no idea those funds were actually. Let me tell you something unbelievable that happened last month. My parents called me home for what they called a family discussion. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew something was off. My sister, Emma, was sitting there with that smirk she wears whenever she thinks she's about to win something. My dad coughed awkwardly and said, we used 87% of your college savings to make a down payment on Emma's new apartment. She needed it more than you. I blinked. My savings. Not theirs. Not shared. Mine. And before I could even speak, Emma leaned back in her chair and said, guess you'll have to start from zero now. Some people just aren't responsible enough to protect their own money. She even laughed. My mom added, don't be dramatic. You barely use that account anyway. Be happy for your sister. I just stared at them. Then suddenly, I burst out laughing. Not polite laughter. Full, unstoppable, stomach-hurting laughter. They looked at me like I'd lost my mind. When I finally caught my breath, I said, you really think I kept my real savings in that old account? Their smiles slowly faded. I continued, that account you emptied? It only had the money I allowed to stay there. My real savings, 5 years of work, investments, and my online business revenue, were moved long ago. My sister's smirk evaporated. My dad asked, how much did you move? I pulled up a screenshot and placed my phone on the table. Their eyes widened. Emma nearly choked. Because right there, bold and clear, was the balance of my actual savings. $428,000. All earned on my own. All untouched. All safe. I leaned back and said, so congratulations, Emma. Enjoy your apartment. Because that 87% you stole? Consider it the last thing you'll ever get from me. My parents tried to justify themselves, saying they assumed I'd share with family anyway. But I looked them straight in the eye and said, family shares. Thieves don't. I stood up, walked out, and blocked all 3 of them from every banking access, account, and business tool they once had permissions for. 2 weeks later, I bought my own place, 4 times nicer than Emma's. And the best part? She called me crying, begging for help with her mortgage. I simply replied, sorry, Emma. But you spent 87% of your kindness on yourself. There's nothing left. When I walked out of my parents' house that day, part of me expected them to call me back. To apologize. Or at least to admit they were wrong. They didn't. Instead, the next morning I woke up to a long message from my mom. You embarrassed us. Emma is crying. We gave her your savings because she's starting a family. You're single and young. You don't need that money right now. I stared at the message in disbelief. It wasn't just the theft. It was the entitlement. The assumption that because I wasn't married or pregnant, my life had no financial value. I typed a single reply. Don't text me again unless it's an apology. And then I muted the group chat. They didn't apologize. Instead, I started getting messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Aunt Lisa texted, you should help your sister. She's always been fragile. Uncle Mark added, family supports each other. Don't be selfish. All of them repeating the same script. And I instantly knew what happened. My parents had twisted the story to make me the villain. So I sent every relative a single screenshot, the empty bank account, and the message from my parents saying they used it without asking me. You could hear the silence through the phone. Suddenly, the guilt-trip messages disappeared. No apologies. Just silence. I learned from a cousin that Emma threw a housewarming party. In the middle of the living room, she stood up and said proudly, my parents helped me buy this place. Some of us don't waste money like certain people. Apparently, everyone laughed. But that laughter wouldn't last long. Because within a month, Emma's dream apartment turned into a nightmare. 2 months after her purchase, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered. It was Emma. Her voice was trembling. Look, I need to talk to you. I almost hung up. But something in her tone made me pause. She took a shaky breath and said, I can't afford the monthly payments. The bank said my income isn't stable enough. Can you just help me? Temporarily? I asked calmly. Why don't you ask Mom and Dad? She hesitated. They said they can't. They already used their savings on my wedding plans. They said you'd help because you have your own place now. The audacity, I replied. You mocked me. You celebrated taking my savings. You laughed at the idea of me being broke. There was silence. Then she said something that almost made me feel sorry for her. I thought you were just lucky. I didn't know you actually worked that hard or were that smart about money. I sighed. Because here's the truth. Growing up, my parents always favored her. She was the golden child. I was the independent one, the one who needed nothing. At least that's what they told themselves. A week later, Emma messaged me a copy of her bank notice. She was close to defaulting. If she missed 2 more payments, they would repossess the apartment. Part of me wanted to ignore her. She earned this. She deserved these consequences. But then she sent one more message, one I never expected. I'm sorry. Not for the money. For how I treated you. For how we all treated you. That made me pause. Because it was the first real apology I'd heard from anyone in my family. I told her I would think about helping, but only under one condition. If I help, I take partial ownership of the apartment. No arguments. No discussion. And I manage your finances until it's stable. She was silent for a long time. Then she finally said, Okay. Not happily. Not proudly. But she accepted. I met Emma in a cafe to go over the numbers. When she saw my real financial portfolio, my investments, my online business income, my savings, she nearly fell out of her chair. You're rich! She whispered it like she couldn't believe it. I shrugged. I worked. I planned. I sacrificed. She swallowed. And I took from you thinking you had nothing. For the first time ever, she looked ashamed. Not jealous. Not defensive. Just ashamed. I decided to help her with the mortgage, not because she deserved it, but because I wanted to break the cycle of favoritism, manipulation, and entitlement that had poisoned our family for years. But helping didn't mean forgiving everything blindly. So I told her, this doesn't fix what you and our parents did. But it's a start. And she nodded, tears in her eyes. 2 days later, my parents stormed into my apartment. No knocking. Just walked in with angry faces. My dad yelled, How dare you take ownership of Emma's apartment? We are still her guardians. Guardians. She's 27. I calmly replied. You took my savings without permission. I'm protecting my investment. My mom shouted, We are your parents. You owe us everything. I looked at them and said the words that finally set me free. I don't owe you anything. Respect is earned, and you lost mine the moment you stole from me. I handed them both envelopes, copies of legal documents proving I now held significant ownership of Emma's property. My dad turned red. My mom started crying. And Emma, who had quietly followed them inside, said, Mom, Dad, stop. I agreed to it. He's helping me. You two only made everything worse. My parents froze. They never expected their golden daughter to defend me. After that day, my parents realized something. They no longer controlled anything. Not me. Not my savings. Not Emma. We went low contact. Not out of hatred, but out of necessity. Emma and I? Surprisingly, we got closer. She started working harder, budgeting smarter, and respecting money, and me, in ways she never had before. Last month, she said, Thank you for not giving up on me. Even when I deserved it. And my response? You deserved consequences. But you also deserved a chance to grow. Family can hurt you more than anyone. But they can also learn, change, and grow if someone is brave enough to break the cycle. And sometimes, the best revenge is not destroying them. It's becoming the person they never believed you could be. And helping them become better too. After that confrontation in my apartment, everything changed in ways I never expected. My parents didn't scream anymore. They didn't demand anything. They just stood there, completely stunned, like they were meeting me for the first time in their lives and realizing I wasn't a child they could manipulate anymore. My mother tried to hold on to her usual tone of superiority, but even she couldn't hide the fear that things were slipping out of her hands. My father looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, as if all the authority he'd spent decades projecting had finally cracked. Emma watched them quietly, her eyes flicking between us, and I could tell that for the first time in her life, she wasn't sure whose side she was supposed to be on. When they left my apartment, they didn't slam the door. They didn't threaten me. They didn't lecture me about family. They simply walked out, defeated and confused. And strangely, I felt neither triumph nor anger. I felt relief. A weight I'd carried for years had finally fallen off my shoulders. I hadn't destroyed my family. I had simply stopped letting them destroy me. In the following weeks, my relationship with Emma slowly evolved into something I never imagined possible. She started texting me for advice, not for money, but for actual guidance. She wanted to learn how to manage her expenses, how to negotiate with the bank, how to grow her income. At first, I kept things strictly formal, focusing only on the mortgage and financial matters. But then something unexpected happened. One evening, while we were reviewing her budget, she looked at me and said, "I don't know how you did it. How you managed to build yourself up when nobody helped you. I always thought things just magically worked out for you. I didn't know you fought this hard." And for the first time, I saw her not as the golden daughter who always took and never gave, but as a person shaped, just like me, by our parents' favoritism, pressure, and warped sense of value. She had grown up believing that everything would be handed to her, while I grew up believing that nothing ever would. Both of us were damaged in different ways. And for the first time, she seemed to understand that. We began meeting once a week to talk, sometimes about money, sometimes about life, sometimes just to sit in silence with coffee and breathe like normal siblings. There were awkward moments, of course. Apologies that came out half-formed. Conversations that cut deeper than expected. But slowly, we started building something real. My parents, however, didn't handle the shift well. They tried calling Emma first, hoping she'd side with them, guilt-trip me, pressure me to reverse the ownership agreement. But Emma didn't budge. She told them bluntly that she had made her own mistakes, that they needed to stop controlling her, and that she wanted to fix her life without their interference. This didn't sit well with my mother, who had always believed she would guide Emma's future like a puppeteer pulling strings. My father went silent, avoiding confrontation, but his coldness spoke for him. They weren't angry at Emma, they were terrified of losing influence over her. When they called me again, their tone had changed completely. There was no shouting, no demanding, no shaming. My mother's voice trembled with something that sounded like guilt, though I knew better than to trust it blindly. She asked if we could meet, just to talk, as she put it. But I declined. Not out of cruelty, but because I finally understood that healing doesn't begin with forced conversations, it begins with boundaries. And for once in my life, I was determined to hold them. Months passed, and Emma made progress. Real progress. She picked up extra work, cut unnecessary expenses, and stuck to her repayment plan with a discipline I never imagined she had. Sometimes she would get discouraged and slip into old habits, impulse buying, procrastination, excuses, but she always caught herself and tried again. And every time she did, she would message me, not to brag but to stay accountable. It was strange, but comforting. She wasn't acting like the spoiled sister I used to resent. She was acting like someone who genuinely wanted to rebuild herself. One evening, she invited me to her apartment, not for help, but to show me something. When I walked in, the place felt different. Cleaner, calmer, more intentional. She had sold half of the unnecessary furniture and replaced it with simple, practical pieces. On the dining table, she placed a folder of documents showing her progress, savings, payment updates, a new job offer she had gotten on her own. Then she looked at me with a shy smile and said, "I want you to know that I'm not doing this because I feel forced. I'm doing it because for the first time, I want to deserve my life." I didn't say anything at first. I just nodded. And in that moment, I realized that helping her wasn't a mistake. It wasn't enabling. It was giving her a chance our parents never had the courage or humility to give. But the biggest surprise came a month later. A letter arrived in my mailbox, handwritten, shaky, folded several times like someone had hesitated before sending it. It was from my father. In it, he apologized, not perfectly, not beautifully, but honestly. He admitted that he'd failed me, that he'd let favoritism and outdated beliefs blind him, that he'd taken from me because he believed I would always survive, no matter what. He wrote that seeing Emma change made him realize how wrong he had been. And at the end, he added one sentence I never thought I'd hear from him. "I am proud of the man you became, even though I didn't know how to raise one." I read that line 3 times. And for the first time in years, I let myself feel something other than anger toward him. I didn't respond immediately. Healing doesn't happen in a day. But it was a beginning. A small door opening where before there had only been walls. Now, months later, my life looks nothing like it used to. I have peace. I have boundaries. I have a stronger relationship with my sister than I ever imagined possible. And my parents? They're learning, slowly, imperfectly, but learning. Not because I demanded it, but because for the first time, consequences forced them to face themselves. And sometimes, I catch myself thinking back to that day when they proudly told me they drained 87% of my savings and expected me to collapse. They thought they had broken me. But in reality, they set the stage for me to rebuild something far stronger than money. They lost control. I found freedom. And we all finally discovered who we truly were, when the masks came off. But freedom, I learned, comes with unexpected echoes. One evening, as I was going through my emails, I saw a new message from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was simple. "Can we talk?" I almost ignored it, thinking it was spam, but something about it made me open it anyway. It was from my mother. Her message wasn't long, but it was unlike anything she had ever written to me. She said she missed me. She said the house felt empty without the tension, without the arguments, without the noise that she once believed held us together. She said she didn't know how to speak to me anymore, because she feared every word might push me further away. She didn't ask me for money. She didn't defend herself. She didn't blame me. She simply wrote, "I want to understand you. I want to fix what I broke. I don't know how. Please teach me." For a long time, I sat in silence, staring at the screen. That wasn't the mother I knew. Or maybe it was. Maybe it was the mother she wanted to be but didn't know how to become until everything fell apart. Part of me wanted to delete the message. Another part, the part that remembered the small good moments, the childhood hugs, the rare soft words, felt something shift. I didn't reply. Not yet. I needed time. But I didn't block her either, and for her, that was already a victory. Meanwhile, Emma was changing in ways I could actually see. Not just financially, emotionally. One day she admitted something that nearly stopped my heart. We were sitting in her living room, reviewing her savings goals, when she suddenly said, "You know, I used to be jealous of you." I blinked. Of me? The one who never got the praise? The one who never got the attention? She continued before I could speak. "Mom and Dad always told me I was special, but I could see how exhausted and stressed they made you. And no matter how hard you worked, they treated your success like an accident. They made me feel important while making you feel invisible. I knew it wasn't fair. But I was too scared to admit it, because their approval was the only thing I had. Her voice cracked, and she looked away, wiping her eyes. When I mocked you, it wasn't confidence. It was fear. Fear that without their praise, I was nothing. I didn't know what to say. I had waited years, decades, to hear words like these, and now that they were finally spoken, they didn't feel like victory. They felt like closure. Like truth. I told her quietly. We were both trapped, Emma. Just in different cages. After that conversation, something between us healed. Not instantly, not perfectly, but genuinely. She stopped seeing me as the sibling she needed to outshine. I stopped seeing her as the enemy our parents had unintentionally created. As spring arrived, Emma invited me to her apartment again, not for finances this time. She said she wanted me to see something. When I walked in, I noticed the walls were different. The photos of our childhood, the ones where she was front and center, and I was somewhere in the corner, had been rearranged. Now we stood side by side. Equal. Balanced. She had repainted the place in soft tones, sold the flashy decorations our parents had convinced her to get, and turned the apartment into something warm, something real. She pointed to a framed quote hanging above the couch. Sometimes the family you rebuild is stronger than the one you were given. She smiled shyly and said, I thought it fit us. And for the first time in years, maybe in our whole lives, I hugged my sister without resentment, without bitterness, just a quiet understanding that both of us were learning how to grow up at the same time, even though we were adults. But the real turning point came 2 weeks later, when my father called me for the first time since he sent the letter. His voice was tired, not angry, not defensive, just tired, like someone who had finally realized how much damage silence can cause. He said he wanted to meet. In public. Somewhere neutral. I agreed, but only because Emma insisted on coming with me. We met at a small cafe on the edge of town. My father sat at the table, hands clasped, staring at the steam rising from his untouched cup of tea. When we approached, he stood up awkwardly, almost nervously, a posture I had never seen from him. He didn't waste time. He didn't make excuses. He didn't try to twist the story. He simply said, I'm sorry. The words were quiet. Almost fragile. He admitted he'd been harsh, prideful, stuck in old beliefs that had shaped him more than he realized. He said he thought showing weakness would make him lose respect, not understanding that the lack of vulnerability had cost him his children instead. He looked at me with eyes that were older than I remembered. I didn't know how to love you properly. But I want to learn, if you'll let me. For the second time in my life, I saw my father cry. The first time had been at his own father's funeral. This time, it was for something far more alive. Emma squeezed my hand under the table. She didn't speak, she didn't need to. Her presence was enough. And in that small cafe, surrounded by strangers who had no idea how many years of pain were melting in that moment, I finally said the words that had been sitting in my chest for far too long. I don't want revenge. I just want a family that doesn't hurt each other. My father nodded, wiping his eyes. Then let's rebuild one. And for the first time, I believed him. The real ending came on a quiet Sunday morning. My parents showed up outside my building, not demanding, not angry, just standing there like two people finally ready to admit they were flawed. My mother held a small memory box with photos of me as a kid, drawings, tiny things I never knew they kept. Her voice shook when she said, We loved you, even when we didn't know how to show it. My father added quietly, We want another chance. Not forgiveness, just a chance to do better. I looked at the box, at the years of silence and mistakes, and for the first time, I felt something shift. Not a full healing, not a miracle, but a beginning. I told them, We can try. That's all any of us can do. Just then, Emma arrived and joined us, smiling, not the smug smile she once had, but a real one. A healed one. The four of us went to a small cafe nearby, and for the first time, there was no tension, no guilt, no roles to play. Just people choosing to grow. As we sat there, laughing quietly over breakfast, I understood something important. They didn't break me. They pushed me to become stronger. And now we were rebuilding, not perfectly, not instantly, but honestly. Sometimes family isn't fixed. Sometimes it's remade. And that's what we finally became. Not perfect. Just better.